assume no, all of us out here know really nothing about
Right.
the project or your history.
Okay, well, let me give you a little personal background, just
Fantastic.
to kind of how I got here, sort of. I guess would be a way to say it. It was back in 1980 that my first wife and I moved to Brattleboro, and when we moved there, neither of us had realized that there had just recently been a resettlement of refugees from Laos there in Brattleboro.
Okay.
But we moved into this apartment in Brattleboro and realized that the people who lived upstairs from us, didn't speak English, and they never went outside to play in the snow.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, we should do something to get to know these people, to welcome them. So we baked a batch of chocolate chip cookies and took them upstairs and knocked on the door. And they opened the door, and we had no language in common other than smiles and bows and nods. But we gave them the cookies. And over the years, we became friends with this family. And it was actually a number of years later that the mom admitted to us that after we'd left that first day, she had flushed the cookies down the toilet.
Oh, wow.
And explained what her thinking had been. That after literally escaping with their lives from soldiers, after she swam across the Mekong River with a baby in one arm, living for several years in a refugee camp, being miraculously reunited with her husband, whom she thought she had lost forever, and then coming to this strange, cold country around the world, that she had no reason to know whether she could trust us or whether we were trying to poison them.
Wow.
And I think I took away a couple lessons from that. One being not to make assumptions about people, and that just to keep an open mind, I think, is part of it. And I think the other lesson I got is that it is worth reaching for people across differences, and so I've sort of taken that on as a kind of a life lesson of, just because someone's different is not a reason for me to turn away. It's a reason to turn towards someone and reach across boundaries or differences between us.
Right.
So a few years ago, as one stage of my semi-retirement, I decided I wanted to volunteer, and I was looking around for something to do, and I knew I wanted to be involved in some way in something international. And I came across a project down in McAllen, Texas. It was a Catholic Charities project helping asylum seekers who were being released from detention in those few hours while they were waiting for a bus to go live with relatives or friends somewhere else in the U.S., giving them things like a meal, some clean used clothing, showers, if they were staying overnight, a place to sleep, just some real basic things, a phone call. I went down for about 10 days and learned a whole lot, and I subsequently went down a few more times over a couple of years. And one of the things that I learned was what is an asylum seeker. I didn't have any sense of the difference between asylum seekers and refugees. And that's something that I'd kind of like to explain to you
absolutely.
and to our audience. Refugees are determined to be refugees, or classified that way by the United Nations. And almost always in groups. So all the people coming out of a particular war or genocide or perhaps even a natural disaster are classified as refugees by the United Nations. And then if it's not safe for them to return to their home country, they're resettled in refugee camps, hopefully temporarily, and then resettled in countries around the world, including some to the United States. And by contrast, asylum seekers are people who are also suffering under some kind of persecution in their home country, and it's not safe for them to be in their own country, but they individually go to another country to seek asylum. And so people go from their own countries to countries all around the world to seek asylum, the United States just being one place where that happens. And this all came out of, in the aftermath of World War II, where the world was faced with so many refugees and determined that people needed that right. And so, as part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, here's the one of the
Yeah, you
articles.
might want to just read it because
Yeah.
there's people listening on the radio.
Okay,
too.
well, yeah, one of the parts of that is that everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. And this is something that the United States and almost all the countries in the world have agreed to this principle. And it's part of international law and it's part of US law. And so that's part of what this country does, among other things, is welcome people that come to our land because it's not safe for them to live where they're from.
So then, how does someone in the asylum program end up in Brattleboro or Portland, Oregon, or Portland, Maine, or how? Are there sites around the country? Are there people in those areas of the country that are, say, send up a flag and say you can send people to our area? How does it work?
Yeah, there isn't. There's nothing official through the government doing
Okay.
that. The way it works, as far as the government is concerned, is that people who either cross the border without authorization and then subsequently say they want asylum or need asylum, or people that literally just come to our border, which is the way it's supposed to be done. People arrive at the border and claim the need for asylum.
Right.
But all of those people, whether they cross the border without authorization or come to the border, are put into prisons.
Okay.
The government actually calls them detention centers, but I believe that's really a euphemism for prisons. I mean, when someone is locked up in somewhat deplorable conditions and doesn't have the right to leave, to me that means they're imprisoned.
Okay.
But then at some point, again, and the system is so full of random elements. It's not like there's rules that get followed in a precise way. But most people who have someone to look after them, friends or relatives somewhere in the U.S., will eventually be released to those people, assuming that the asylum seekers have passed a certain standard of that their fear is credible. So the government does examine that. Then they might be released to go be with people. But unfortunately, they're not allowed, for some reason, our laws say that they're not allowed to work for between a half a year and a year or so after they've been here in the U.S. So they're not able to support themselves. They're not able to earn the money to feed themselves. So if they don't have family or friends, they're generally kept in detention until they can either figure out how from detention to figure out how to plead their case in an immigration court, often without any legal support or representation, in many cases without any access to language, trying to get witnesses from their home country from prison. You can sort of imagine how hard that must be to represent yourself from prison. And so unless they are successful in immigration court, then they'll be deported eventually. But the government will also release people sometimes if an organization such as ours or a church group or somebody says, hey, we would be glad to help these people out. So after volunteering in Texas for these number of times, learning about asylum seekers and figuring out that the people I was seeing there who had been released all had family or friends to go to, but I imagined and was accurate to imagine that, there are people that are just kept in detention, but they would be eligible for release if we offered them a place. And so we formed, a group of us here locally formed this nonprofit organization, Community Asylum Seekers Project, and with the idea that we would provide the basic needs, basic daily needs, and a supportive community for at least a few people who would otherwise be kept in detention.
Right. Do you have any idea of like numbers in the United States that are currently in detention, or ones that are actually in situations that have been released to the communities?
Yeah, I don't have numbers about release, but we're talking in the, tens to hundreds of thousands.
Mm-hmm.
The government, it's the part of the detention thing, that the whole system, a piece of it that makes it worse, in my opinion, is that many of the prisons are run by private prison corporations.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So it's corporations and shareholders that are making money by keeping people imprisoned. And Congress actually guarantees a certain number of beds to the prison industry. I think it's 34,000 immigrants will be detained every night in the United States.
Wow.
By statute.
Okay.
And then the number obviously can go over that. But in terms of how many people have come in the last few years, I think we're talking in the neighborhood of, more than 100,000 each year. Kind of thing.
And then in terms of, internationally, are there, I'm sure different countries all handle this differently.
Right.
Are there other countries that are more predisposed to humanely kind of working with a system
Right.
to do it, or?
Well, Canada certainly comes to mind.
Yeah.
I mean, there are many countries that, again, I think certainly the majority of countries in the world have signed on to this and give asylum, grant asylum. Canada is certainly more welcoming. People are not imprisoned. I know when, in the last year or so, a number of people have emigrated, have sort of given up on trying to get asylum or in the United States and have gone to Canada, and those people have been, I know they've reconverted one of their stadiums into housing, sort of temporary housing for people.
Wow.
But I think it wasn't the sense of a prison as much as, we need to give people,
Right.
we need to build tents and shelters and stuff and figure out a way to shelter people. I know that Australia is another country similar to the U.S. that has not necessarily treated people with a warm welcome, let's say, put it that way. So, countries do handle it differently. And certainly some countries are overwhelmed with it. Their little countries get asylum seekers too. The countries, I know Mexico, which is certainly much poorer than the U.S., also accepts asylum seekers. And, many countries do.
Right. So I'm sure, I think we were discussing before that your local organization has a website, which probably has more information that people can get. Do you want to share that very slowly and clearly with us?
Okay, so the acronym for Community Asylum Seekers Project, we call it CASP, C-A-S-P.
Okay.
And the website is simply CASP VT for Community Asylum Seekers Project, Vermont. So caspvt.org.
Okay.
And people can will find our contact information, phone number, email address, and so on, so people can contact us. There's plenty of opportunities to find out more information, to sign up for a very occasional newsletter.
Okay.
People can certainly donate, but also volunteer. There's lots and lots of room for people to volunteer. And in terms of where we're at, in terms of size and so on, at this point we've settled people in 2 different host homes. So our model is, our ideal model is that someone would open their home and be willing to share their home with an asylum seeker individual or family for a period of time. And so there's a young woman from South Asia, an individual who's here with a family in Rockingham. And then we have a family from Mexico, a mom and her 2 young children, and they're actually living with myself and my partner in our home here in Rockingham as well. And but we are in the process of expanding. I'm expecting that probably within the next month we'll have a family coming to Brattleboro and a family being invited to live in Reading, up north of North Springfield. So we're kind of reaching out into surrounding communities.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and when, I know it's probably impossible to estimate when you say sort of a temporary, or someone coming to live in your home for a period of time. Is it like, what's the shortest period of time that would make sense to be able to share your home? You don't want to.
We think about it in terms of asking people for a commitment of about a year, and probably it's more like a year and a half would be ideal. And that's based on partly, I said before, that people don't have the permission to work right away. Again, people could come to us at different stages in the asylum process. The the legal process of trying to claim asylum in an immigration court generally takes 2 or 3 years. But 6 months after someone files their actual asylum claim in immigration court, then they're eligible to apply for a work permit. So for example, the family staying with us, the mom and her children came to us last October. And I'm guessing from the way things are looking, she's likely to get a work permit probably right around the very end of this year, maybe in December. And so then once she starts working, has saved up enough money to get an apartment, something like that, then we would see gradually we would, be encouraging her to, reach for independence. At this point, she's not allowed to work, so she's putting her energy into learning English and building up job skills that would be applicable in this culture and so on. So she's busy at work trying to make it a go of things, but is not yet able to actually earn money.
And I guess it could be kind of a two-way street. In other words, if you're either dealing with, an individual or a family that you are welcoming and placing in the community, and I guess also if you perhaps, and we've had a little bit of discussion of this with other people in the Asylum Seekers Project, maybe if there was a space that could accommodate several people, then you could welcome individuals in a different way.
That's
too,
sure.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, we're basically, as we look out into surrounding communities, for example, there's a very active group in Putney that's really interested in doing something, being involved with us, but they haven't yet identified someone in that community who's ready to open their home.
Right.
But a possibility might be for them to chip in to rent an apartment, and do it that way. And then again, each family or individual that comes does need a team of support people around them to help them, learn our culture. In many cases, learn a new language, to help with all sorts of things. Here's how you use the money. Here's how you go shopping. Here's how you access the school system.
Right. And I'm sure there's a challenge in Vermont because we are a rural state, that, people come and then if they're off somewhere and then the transportation issues as opposed to being in the middle of a town or a city where they could actually walk to something and have a lot of regular interaction.
Sure.
Too, it's what we are. It makes Vermont very interesting,
Right.
but there's certain challenges that come with that and integrating people in.
Right. I know the family coming to Brattleboro will be lucky in that, they'll clearly be able to walk to the supermarket, to the doctor's office, to the library, all of those things, which is a little hard to do from our part of Rockingham.
Exactly. That's wild. That's wild. Wow. So, so what would, your vision as you move forward? Is it, this is like real deal stuff, working with these real issues of people's lives. And I can't imagine being resettled or something somewhere else. It's such a foreign, it could happen. But wow, to live in that reality and that opening story about the cookies and having to think, because food is kind of a universal sharing thing. And to have been through a situation where, oh my God, I got to think about this is really, really quite sobering. Totally sobering. And especially in our society where we have so much access to everything and we're slightly inconvenienced. My AC doesn't work and we're upset the computer isn't fast enough. And then there's like, wait a minute, this is like what's really, really happening in the world.
No, it's really true. That it's pretty clear to me that I've talked to through the volunteer work in Texas and then what I'm doing now. I've talked to a lot of asylum seekers, and people are not coming to the United States to get a good job or because they always wanted to live in the U.S. In fact, it's the opposite. People have said, I never wanted to come to the U.S. I loved where I lived, but my life was at risk. Family members have been killed. This is the only way I can save my children. People are coming because they're desperate. So,
I know we got a little high sign, so we only have a couple minutes left.
Okay.
Was there anything besides repeating your website very quickly you wanted to share, like a minute?
A minute. Yeah. Well, just the I think just to emphasize that the stories I've heard about just how desperate people are, and we sometimes hear in the news like, oh, these people are just coming here because, you're using asylum as an excuse. Has that ever happened? Perhaps, but the people I've talked to, and I've talked to many, many people, literally are running for their lives or the lives of their children. Most everybody I've talked to has lost family members that have been killed from some situation or another, gang violence, whatever it is. And, this is their best chance of being able to survive.
Right.
And, you talk about, worrying about convenience. It's like, what is it for me to give a little bit of my time or my space?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's true.
So.
Whoa. And thank you. So it's great to have you here on the show.
Yeah.
I think this is something. Yes, yeah, please. And give the website again.
Yeah, www.caspvt, so CASPVT.org.
Right.
And there you'll find email, phone, contact, and
Right.
definitely encourage people to get in touch.
Yep, and I'm sure, and I'm sure there's plenty of ways for people to be involved and be supportive of it.
Definitely.
On the volunteer level, on the donation level, and let's keep this conversation going.
For sure.
I hope to have you back again with some updates
Great.
about what's going on, and hopefully we get the current Mexican family integrated more into the community
happening
somewhere,
well,
and
yeah.
that'd be great.
The community has been great.
So thank you. So once again, it's great having Steve on the program with the Community Asylum Seekers Project, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank Fact TV for providing such a great resource for us to share information in the community, and also thank underwriters to RAMP, the Vermont Arts Council, the National Endowment for the Arts, First Light, formerly SovereignNet, and Chroma Technology. And until next time, this is Robert McBride. See you on the square.